Hey guys, Becky here, FiveTwoBaker. Welcome back. This week I'll be sharing with you how I make this sugar magnolia. You won't need any cutters. I'll leave a link down in the description for a free template you can download, and you can go no veiner with this, but in case you'd like one, I'll leave a link down in the description for a generic veiner that I've been loving so much. But let's get right to it. So to start off, we're going to use an 18 or 20 gauge wire as our carrier wire for the center. And here, one of the template cutouts I have is a little sizing guide for the center. I'm going to use some green gum paste or flour paste, whatever you have on hand, and sort of get it close to that size, maybe a little bit smaller. For this center, I'm going to go with 2 tones. And for this, I'll be using a very thin piece of white gum paste for the outside. If you're using a lighter color center and then a darker color on the outside, you could go ahead and paint it, but it's a little tough to paint when the inside is dark and the outside is light. So that's why I'm going this route, where I'm just going to cover it and have it be 2 layers of color, and you'll see why in just a bit. I go ahead and snip off any extra pieces that don't fit, and then I form it into sort of a rounded diamond shape to get that magnolia center. Once I'm happy with the shape, I dip my carrier wire into some edible glue, and then I pop it right in, pinch the bottom to secure it. And now, while it's still soft, before it begins to firm up and dry, I'm going to use some small embroidery scissors, and I'm going to snip it all the way around, some tiny little snips just to get that fringe that the center has. I want to hold my scissors almost parallel to the cone. I don't really want to dig into the center. And the reason that I made that outer layer so thin is just so I have a little bit of color contrast. And when I cut into it, I see the green poking out, but the white is on the outside, if that makes sense. I'll go ahead and continue snipping in layers all the way from the fattest bottom of my cone to the very tip of it. Now once I'm done snipping it, I sort of fold them out just a little bit to give them a bit more movement, but be careful because they are thin, and so you don't want to break them off. Once I'm happy with the little spikes, the last thing I'm going to do is focus on that bottom thinner part, and I'm going to use this little fondant tool I have to sort of score the sides up and down to give it some texture. And once I'm happy with that, I'll go ahead and set it off to dry completely. Now, just as an example, every magnolia is different, so feel free to play around with the colors and give them any colors that you would like. Just make sure that once you're done, you go ahead and set it off to dry completely. While my center is drying, I'm going to go ahead and make some petals for the flower. I'll be using this veining board to make sure I have a thicker center because I will be wiring each of my petals today. Now, because these petals are a bit larger than my usual petals, I am going to use something a bit sturdier, a maybe 26 gauge wire, maybe a 24. And I'm going to hook the end to make sure that the weight of the petal doesn't make it spin around on the wire if it doesn't adhere properly. Once I have my wire set, then I go ahead and roll my flour paste onto my veining board. I pull it right off, and then making sure that the center is where it belongs, I use my little template guide to cut out each of my petals. For this flower, I'm just going to go with one size petal, but you can go ahead and go larger and smaller than the template, whatever it is that you need. and then I go ahead and thread my floral wire that has the edible glue on it into the petal on that thicker part, and I make sure it's adhered on well, pinch the bottom, and then I put it on my foam board so I can start thinning out the ends. Once I'm happy with the ends being thin, then I go ahead and pop it into my veiner. This veiner does have a very faint vein, so I make sure to give it a nice good squeeze. I take it right off, and now really important is the shape of the petal. I like my petals to be lots of different shapes, so I go ahead and put it in an egg mold, but I don't press it all the way down. I want to make sure that each of my petals, when I put them on here, they have some movement, some curves. Some of my petals will be twisted one way, others will be twisted in the opposite way. Some will have a straight curve, others will be a bit more flat. I want them each to be different. Now once my petals are completely dry, I'm going to go ahead and use a mix of fuchsia and red to get the shade of color that I want. And I'm going to start at the base closest to the wire and sort of dust it up, going higher in the center than on the sides. I'll do this for both the front and the back, and I'm going in with a fluffy brush so that everything is light and fades out nicely. Any excess color I have, I'll go ahead and use a clean fluffy brush to dust the excess off so I don't get it on other parts of my petal. Now that all of my petals are dusted and the center of my flower is all dry, I'm going to go ahead and attach each of the petals one by one, taping it onto the carrier wire with some floral tape. To begin this, I'll go ahead and attach the floral tape to my carrier wire first, and then I'll attach the petals one by one, keeping it as close to the center of my flower as possible. I want my most closed petals, the one with the biggest arch, to be in the center first, so they look like they're closing in on the center, and then the other petals will open up more. Ideally, I would have gone with 5 petals in the center, but mine weren't fitting, so I'm just going with whatever fits and works. And then every layer after the first will just go in between the petals from the first layer, and so on and so on. So my petals are not layered on top of each other, they're overlapping each other. I think the hardest part here is just keeping them really tight and close to the base, but do that as best you can. Once they're all on there, then go ahead and angle your floral tape and run it down the stem of your flower to cover all those extra little wires from the petals. Also, I'm using a brown floral tape just because Magnolia has more of a branch to it, and so I'm going more for the realistic effect here. And then go ahead and adjust your petals. This is where the movement I was talking about earlier really comes in. It doesn't look cookie cutter. It looks more realistic in my opinion. In the future, I'll add a few more petals, but I think this is really pretty. As always, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please do give it a thumbs up and don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I would super appreciate that. Everything helps. If you have any suggestions or any comments, please drop them down below and I'll make sure to get back to you. If not, I'll see you guys for the next tutorial.